Chapter 1 Montana, where the land writes history. The big picture, the forces that created Montana and are still changing its land, also shape the lives of Montana's people. Our story begins with the land. If the land now called Montana could tell you the story of how it came to be, it would be a very dramatic tale. Continents collided and volcanoes erupted. Glaciers marched across the land and retreated. Seas filled and burst their banks and filled again. Winds blew dirt around, water carried dirt away, and earthquakes rearranged where the dirt was. Some of these things happened very slowly, over millions of years. Some happened suddenly. If you could watch it, like film on fast forward, it would be the most thrilling movie in the world. In fact, the land does tell its story. Some of it is told through the science of geology.
Geo equals earth, logi equals study.
Geology is the study of the Earth's physical structures and the processes that change those structures. Geologists look at the landscape of rocks and dirt and see what formed that landscape: earthquake, glacial action, volcano, or other forces. A good geologist could take you on a walk near where you live and tell you the history of the land you call home. Montana's deepest history. Have you ever seen a mountain that looks like a shipwreck with its bow pointing up toward the sky? Have you ever found fossils of sea creatures on the top of a mountain? Did you know that camels lived here 65 million years ago? Why are they not here now? To solve these puzzles, we must look far back in time. Has your body always looked the way it does today? Many things have changed and shaped your body since you were born. Some of them happened very slowly. Some happened suddenly. Most geologic changes happened very slowly too, over millions of years. Some happened in sudden, catastrophic events, such as a flood, an earthquake, or a volcano. To really see how much you've changed, you would want to look at a picture taken on the day you were born. Scientists estimate that the Earth is about 4.6 billion years old. How long is 4.6 billion years? If you stacked 1 billion pennies, they would make a tower 987 miles high. A stack of 4.6 billion pennies, one for every year of the Earth's age, would stand about 3,948 miles high. If you laid that stack down on its side, it would stretch from Billings to almost Lima, Peru. Geologic time intervals. To study the history of the Earth, scientists have divided its age into periods called geologic time intervals. Just as your life can be divided into infancy, childhood, adolescence, and adulthood, scientists divide the Earth's life into 4 eras: the Precambrian, when the oldest rocks on Earth were formed; Paleozoic, ancient life; Mesozoic, middle life; and Cenozoic, recent life. The Precambrian era, awash in seas. The first day on the Earth's calendar, at least the first that scientists know about now, happened about 4.6 billion years ago in a time called the Precambrian era. 4.6 billion years ago to 544 million years ago. Geologic evidence shows that a great sea covered all of present-day Montana and its surrounding region. This sea was dotted with islands, which were actually the tops of ancient mountain ranges. As these mountains wore away, mud and sand settled to the bottom of the sea and became sediment, solid matter that settles to the bottom of fluid. Over millions of years, this sediment was heated and compressed until it formed basement rock, the foundation of all the other layers of Earth. Montana's basement rock contains fossils, remains or impressions of ancient creatures, of some of the earliest forms of life. Primitive, one-celled plants and invertebrates, animals without backbones, 3 billion-year-old algae fossils from the Precambrian era, some of the oldest known fossils of early life, have shown up in Glacier National Park. The Paleozoic era, life begins. The next period, called the Paleozoic era, 544 million to 245 million years ago, saw seas wash over the region and draw back again many times. These seas piled more sediment on top of the basement rocks. Primitive fishes and hard-shelled animals like clams, snails, and shellfish developed during this era. Early plants and forests grew. Today, Montana's hillsides hold fossils of worm tubes 500 million years old and snails 400 million years old, signs of life from the early Paleozoic era. The Mesozoic era, plate collisions, volcanoes, and dinosaurs. Then came the Mesozoic era, 245 million to 65 million years ago, the age of the dinosaurs. This was an exciting time in Montana's geology. Forces beneath the surface of the earth caused the land to rise and fall dramatically. Shallow seas and swamps formed. The climate warmed up, encouraging the growth of palm and banana trees. Most impressive of all, dinosaurs tramped the lowlands. Scientists have found many dinosaur bones from the Mesozoic era in Montana, including whole skeletons of Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops dating back 155 million years. One of Montana's most important dinosaurs remained a secret until 1978. That year, paleontologists, scientists who study fossils, investigating near Shoto, identified a family of duck-billed dinosaurs that cared for their young. They named the new species Maiasaurus, which means good mother lizard. As plants and animals of the Mesozoic era died, layers and layers of sediment piled on top of them. Over time, the heat and pressure of the earth transformed some of these layers into fossil fuels, oil, coal, and natural gas, now found in many parts of Montana. Another exciting thing happened near the middle of the Mesozoic era. Continental plates of the Earth's crust began moving around and crashing into one another. They moved slowly, a few inches per year, but produced dramatic results. As the continental plates collided, the Earth's crust buckled and fractured, forming the Rocky Mountains all along the western spine of the North American continent. In some places, the sea floor thrust upwards several miles into the air. This is how fossils of sea creatures got to the top of mountains. Many of the jutting peaks of the Rockies are angled layers of sediment pointing upward toward the sky. In some places, magma, hot, molten material beneath the Earth's crust that forms igneous rock, erupted through the surface as volcanoes. When magma reaches the surface of the Earth, it becomes lava, molten rock. These volcanoes spewed cinder, ash, and lava out across the land, filling river valleys and changing the shape of the landscape. Many of the isolated mountain ranges of central Montana are pieces of old volcanoes. All this geologic activity lifted whole regions, like eastern Montana, higher above sea level. It also carved new waterways across the western third of the North American continent, and it changed the makeup of the soil. Then, toward the end of the Mesozoic era, the climate cooled. Evergreen forests sprouted up west of the Continental Divide. The lowland east of the Rocky Mountains became high-elevation grasslands. Montana began to look a little more like it does today. Montana's rambunctious past produced some of its greatest treasures. All this geologic activity created veins of gold, silver, copper, lead, zinc,
molybdenum,
platinum, and palladium. Montana's geologic processes also formed fossil fuels, as well as gems like the famous Yogo sapphires. It is easy to see why Montana is nicknamed the Treasure State, and why the state motto is Oro y Plata, Spanish for gold and silver. The Cenozoic era, Ice Ages. Montana's climate has always had a huge effect on life here. Never was this truer than in the Cenozoic era, 65 million years ago, to the present. The word Cenozoic means recent life. This era introduced the first mammals and the first human beings. It was also the time of the Ice Ages. When the Cenozoic era began, the land dried up and became more desert-like. Volcanoes were still quite active across the west. Then, about 2 million years ago, the climate cooled and grew wetter, producing heavy rains and snowfall. Temperatures dropped by only a few degrees, but it was enough that the snow and ice accumulated faster than it melted, creating glaciers, masses or slow-moving rivers of ice that advanced across the land. Glaciers acted like bulldozers. They forced everything in front of them upward and out to the edges, pushing rock and earth into new shapes. In Montana, glaciers pushed around piles of rock and earth, large boulders, and even entire ridges. They formed ice dams that created huge lakes and forced rivers to find new outlets to the sea. Imagine a wall of ice more than 2 miles deep, stretching across the current course of the Missouri River from the Rocky Mountains east toward North Dakota. This ice sheet weighed down the surface of the land itself. At least 4 times glaciers moved into northern Montana, pushing rocks and sediment to form U-shaped mountain valleys, and then leaving lakes and rivers behind when they receded during warmer periods. These glaciers formed much of Montana's valley geography. After the last ice age, which occurred between 10,000 and 13,000 years ago, the climate warmed again. The lush foliage that had supported the megafauna,
large animals,
dried up and became desert or grasslands. The world began to look more like it does today. Most of the prehistoric mammals, including mastodons, woolly mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, and the giant beaver, either adapted, changed to meet the requirements of their new environment, or became extinct. The enormous woolly mammoths and mastodons became extinct. The large, short-faced bear and dire wolf evolved into their smaller, modern cousins, the grizzly and the timber wolf. Some animals, like horses and tapirs, became extinct in North America, but survived elsewhere. The new climate, with its own set of weather patterns and vegetation, encouraged the development of mammals that we know. Bison, elk, deer, bears, bighorn sheep, coyotes, skunks, and rabbits. The meadowlark and bald eagle appeared. Trout and salmon moved into the rivers. Montana's weather patterns, geography, watersheds, vegetation, and animal life settled into their current pattern for a few thousand years. The Ice Age may sound like a very long time ago, but many scientists believe that another ice age will happen in the future as the cycle continues. Geologic forces still shape the land. The geologic forces that form the land are still actively changing it today. Every little earthquake or geyser is a reminder that the construction of the world is still going on. Earthquakes, the intermountain seismic belt. You may not be able to feel it very often, but the Earth's crust is still moving and shifting. Up to 10 small earthquakes occur in Montana every day, most of them detectable only by sensitive equipment. In fact, Montana ranks number 8 in the nation in number of earthquakes per year. All along the backbone of the Rocky Mountains, from Kalispell in northwest Montana, south through Utah, stretches a region of active earthquake faults. It is called the Intermountain Seismic Belt. This is where earthquakes are most likely to happen, as the crustal plates continue moving against each other. 2 of the largest historic earthquakes in this region happened within this belt, one in 1983 near Bora Peak, Idaho, measuring 7.3 on the Richter scale, and the other in 1959 at Hebgen Lake, Montana. Volcanoes. Is the Yellowstone caldera ready to blow again? Yellowstone National Park, on the southern edge of Montana, gives visitors an insight into the power of geologic activities that helped form the Rocky Mountain region. About 2.1 million years ago, molten rock exploded through the Earth's crust here. It was a cataclysmic,
violent, sudden
eruption, more powerful than the world had ever seen. This explosion spewed so much magma out of the Earth that it created a giant caldera, or crater, 50 miles long, 37 miles wide, and several hundred yards high. The eruption spewed plumes of smoke, ash, and gas into the stratosphere, circling the Earth many times. It clouded the skies enough to change the climate of North America. This ash layer is detectable in drill holes beneath the Gulf of Mexico. The volcano also sent great rivers of ash, pumice, and gas over the land, creating great lava beds throughout the west. The top of that volcano collapsed back into the center, built up, and erupted 2 more times. The last eruption was about 650,000 years ago. It formed the present Yellowstone caldera, a large crater formed by a volcanic explosion or the collapse of a volcanic cone. Today, the Yellowstone caldera is 53 miles long and 28 miles wide and is the largest known single eruptive area in the world. Volcanologists, scientists who study volcanoes, calculate that in some places the ground has risen 28.5 inches in the past century. Looking at the pattern of cataclysmic volcanic action at Yellowstone, they wonder if the world is due for another spectacular eruption sometime soon. Erosion gives, erosion takes away. Erosion, the wearing away of soil and rock by ice, water, or wind, happens much more slowly than volcanoes or earthquakes. Yet, erosion has shaped parts of Montana in many important and beautiful ways. In eastern Montana, the Missouri and Yellowstone rivers have eroded below the level of the grassy plains, high elevation grasslands, to create rugged buttes, bluffs, and badlands. Erosion can benefit agricultural lands by moving rich topsoils downriver and downhill into valley bottoms, creating good farmland. Erosion also hurts Montana's agricultural land by washing nutritive, providing nutrition, soils farther downstream to other places. The 3 ecological regions of Montana. Have you ever driven all the way across Montana? From the mountains of the west, across the Continental Divide, over the Rocky Mountains, through the foothills, and out onto the grasslands of the east? In some ways, our state is like 3 different countries. Within its boundaries lie 3 distinctly different ecologies: the western, Columbia Plateau; central, Rocky Mountain Front; and eastern, Northern Plains regions. Geography, climate, and resources have shaped the history and culture of each region differently. The western region, rugged mountains, forested ridges, high precipitation. Western Montana is crumpled into continuous mountains, winding rivers, and thick forests. If you live in this region, you probably see mountains wherever you look. The only way through the mountains is by natural passes, low saddles between the peaks. Between the mountains lie wide, fertile valleys with rich soil that has been nourished by geologic activity and precipitation, rain and snow, over thousands of years. Moisture-laden clouds moving in from the Pacific Ocean hit the tall mountains and drop an average of 15 to 23 inches of precipitation per year. In some areas, it snows more than 300 inches per year. As a result, this region is greener and supports more vegetation than any other region of the state. What to look for? Montana's western rivers feed the Columbia River, which flows west to the Pacific Ocean. Flathead Lake, encompassing 197 square miles of northwestern Montana, is the largest natural freshwater body of water west of the Great Lakes. Ash, elm, cedar, and larch trees grow only in the western region. The tallest pine tree in Montana is a 300-year-old ponderosa pine over 180 feet tall, growing near St. Regis. A grove of giant cedar trees, unlike any other trees in the state, grows near Libby. Most of Montana's grizzly bears live in western Montana. Beargrass and bitterroot, the state flower, grow mostly in the western region. Central region, isolated mountains, high plains, Chinook winds. Central Montana spreads east from the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. Its small, scattered mountain ranges rise above gently rolling plains. The most prominent mountain clusters in the region are the Sweetgrass Hills, the Bears Paws, the Little Rockies, the High Woods, the Moccasin Judiths, the Big Snowies, the Crazies, the Pryors, the Big and Little Belts, and the Bighorns. Here, the Rocky Mountains create a rain shadow, an area on the inland side of a mountain range that is drier because it is sheltered from rain-bearing clouds. Precipitation in central Montana averages only 12 inches per year. Trees and other vegetation are more sparse than in the moist western region. Temperatures in the central region can range from -40 to 105 degrees Fahrenheit. The central region is Montana's Chinook corridor. Chinooks are blustery, warm, dry winds that blow down the eastern slopes of the mountains and can raise temperatures as much as 50 degrees in several hours. They can melt a snowbank in an afternoon and rob the soil of moisture. Some Indians call the Chinook wind the snow eater. Another wintertime phenomenon of the high plains east of the Rockies is the Alberta Clipper, a frigid, dry wind that forms on the high plains of Alberta, Canada, and cruises southeastward like a ship sailing over the land at 40 to 60 miles per hour. Alberta clippers rarely leave more than a few inches of powdery snow, but they bring ground blizzards, sub-zero temperatures, and serious drifting. What to look for? Ponderosa pine, Douglas fir, and spruce trees cover the mountains, while blue bunch wheatgrass, timothy grass, and fescue fill the grasslands. Lupines, larkspur, and Indian blanket flower grow on the hillsides, and prickly pear cactus and sagebush grow in the lowlands. Montana's two largest river systems, the Missouri River and the Yellowstone River, begin in central Montana. Mule deer and pronghorn spread throughout the lowlands, with black bear, elk, and moose in the forests and hills. Pheasants, sage-grouse, and Hungarian partridge hide in the brush, and hawks, falcons, and eagles soar in the sky. Trout, sturgeon, and bass are the most important fish species. Eastern region, rolling plains, persistent winds, the endless sky. Eastern Montana is almost uninterrupted grassland. Here, the Missouri Breaks and the Badlands in Makoshika State Park form two of the most dramatic examples of a landscape sculpted by water and wind erosion. Eastern Montana is dry, windy, and extreme. Temperatures here are often colder in winter and hotter in summer than in the rest of the state. Arctic storms blow in blizzards and extreme cold from the north. Summer hailstorms sometimes ruin crops. Yet, with all this storm action, eastern Montana receives only an average of 11 to 14 inches of rain per year and sees many years of drought, making water extremely important in this area. Ranches and farms require more irrigation, bringing in a supply of water to make farmland more productive, more space for grazing, and a little more patience than in the other regions. The towns are small and far apart. What to look for? The Fort Peck Dam forms the Fort Peck Reservoir on the Missouri River, the fifth largest human-made reservoir in the United States, 134 miles long, 220 feet at its deepest, and 1,520 miles of shoreline. Woody shrubs, like juniper, thrive in the dry, elevated soils of eastern Montana, while ponderosa pine, Douglas fir, and spruce trees grow in the high elevations. Plants include sage,
yucca,
shrubby cinquefoil, prickly pear cactus, snakeweed, and rabbit brush. Native grasses like needle and thread grass, bluestem wheatgrass, and
grama
grass were perfectly adapted to the bison, whose hooves agitated the topsoil just enough to spread grass seeds easily without disturbing the roots. Even warm water prairie streams that seem lifeless actually teem with hundreds of fish species. The legendary paddlefish can grow to 100 pounds. Pronghorn, jackrabbits, weasels, and porcupines live in the hills and plains. You are likely to see wild turkeys here, as well as Hungarian partridge, sage-grouse, and pheasant. A land of contrast. Montana is a land of many opposites. Temperatures can get as cold as negative 70 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter, Rogers Pass, 1954, and as hot as 117 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer, Glendive, 1893, and Medicine Lake, 1937. Its lowest point is only 1,892 feet above sea level, Kootenai River Valley, while its highest peak is 12,693 feet high, Granite Peak, near Yellowstone National Park. The state has many rivers and lakes, yet drought is a constant threat. The land is rich in gems, minerals, gas, oil, wildlife, grazing land, and topsoil, yet it struggles economically. Many people enjoy Montana's open land and distance from large cities, but these features make transportation one of our highest expenses. Mountains, the backbone of Montana. Montana's name came from the Spanish term montaña relucientes, which means shining mountains, a Spanish translation of what the Indians called the Rocky Mountains. There are 28 important mountain ranges in Montana, and about 1/3 of the land is mountainous. The continental divide of the Rocky Mountains divides the westward flowing rivers, which run into the Pacific, from the eastward flowing rivers, which eventually run into the Gulf of Mexico. Mountains, hills, buttes, bluffs, and cliffs have played an important part in Montana history. They influence climate, vegetation, and wildlife. They determine transportation routes. They contain valuable gems and metals. Sometimes they can be used as tools, as when early Indian people hunted bison at a buffalo jump. Travel across many of these mountains would have been impossible if geologic forces had not carved passes across which people could move to hunt, trade, communicate, and ship goods. Rivers. 3 major river systems feed the land. One of the things that makes Montana unique,
one of a kind,
is its rivers. Within Montana's boundaries lie the headwaters, the source of a river, of 3 major river systems that run into 3 different seas. The Columbia River system flows into the Pacific Ocean. The Missouri River system flows into the Mississippi River and eventually into the Gulf of Mexico. And the Saskatchewan River system, which begins as St. Mary's River in Glacier National Park, flows northeast into Hudson's Bay and eventually into the North Atlantic Ocean. This is something no other state has. Water is life, goes an old saying. If so, Montana gives life to the entire North American continent in a way that no other place does. Rivers provided some of the earliest transportation corridors through the West. Rivers form natural valleys and usually follow paths of least resistance through mountain passes or across level valleys. Most highways and railroad tracks, power lines, electrical cables, petroleum pipelines, and service facilities follow alongside rivers, creating power corridors. Throughout most of Montana's history, rivers have been basic lifelines to downstream communities, markets, and cultural influences. People rely on the land. Montana's people have always been tied to the land in both obvious and hidden ways. The first people, thousands of years ago, made their living directly from the land and its plants and animals. Later, American Indians developed sophisticated ways to live on and prosper from the land and its resources. Then, European and American explorers came to seek out new opportunities. Bison hunters, fur trappers, prospectors, cattle ranchers, farmers, railroaders, dam builders, hunting guides, and truckers. Almost every Montanan since the very beginning has somehow been influenced by the land. Expressions of the people, symbols of the treasure state. Sometimes the way people feel about the place where they live is just too big to describe in words. Symbols help us express feelings like respect for the land, pride in our communities, and a sense of place. Like most other states, Montana has adopted many symbols that represent people's appreciation for the things that make Montana special. State Seal. The Montana State Seal depicts Montana's history and natural beauty. At the top, a sunrise shines over snowy mountains, a pick, a shovel, and a plow. Symbols of Montana's mining and farming heritage are arranged in front of mountains, hills, trees, cliffs, waterfalls, and the Missouri River. State Flag. The Montana state flag shows the state seal on a blue rectangle with yellow edges. This flag was copied from one taken into battle during the Philippine insurrection in 1898 by the 1st Montana Infantry, U.S. Volunteers. The name, Montana, at the top was added in 1981. State Songs. Montanans have written many songs about Montana, and the state has adopted 3 of them as official state songs. The first, called Montana, was written by Butte newspaper editor Charles Cohen and famous songwriter Joseph E. Howard in 1910. There is also a state ballad, Montana Melody, by LeGrand Harvey, adopted in 1983. And in 2007, the legislature officially approved Montana Lullaby by Ken Overcast as the official state lullaby. State gemstones, agate and sapphire. Agates from the east and sapphires from the west share the spotlight as Montana's two state gemstones. The endless variation of agates represents the uniquely beautiful landscape of eastern Montana. The brilliant sapphires found in western Montana, especially the Yogo sapphires found near Yogo Creek, represent the luminous, light-filled beauty of western Montana. Yogo sapphires are unique because they retain their brilliance even in artificial light, which no other sapphires in the world will do. State flower, bitterroot. Montana Indians use the dried roots of the bitterroot for food and trade. A traditional story tells how the bitterroot came to be. The sun heard a mother crying because she could not find food for her family. The sun changed her tears into the bitterroot so the mother would always have food for her children. You can find bitterroot growing near mountains and boulders of western Montana in spring and summer. State tree, ponderosa pine. The ponderosa pine is the most common tree in Montana. The ponderosa can go 300 feet tall and 8 feet thick. It can be seen almost everywhere along the roads of western Montana. It symbolizes the beauty and utility of Montana's resources. State animal, grizzly bear. Most of the grizzly bears in the lower 48 states live in Montana. Adult grizzlies can grow to 8 feet long and weigh 1,500 pounds. Their back feet leave paw prints as big as magazines. They can run as fast as a horse for short distances. The size, strength, and beauty of the grizzly bear make it an important symbol of Montana and a good choice for state animal. State fossil, Maiasaura. Some of the most important fossils in the world came from Montana. Montana adopted the Maiasaura as its state fossil after an important discovery at Egg Mountain near Choteau revealed the first proof that some dinosaurs took care of their babies the way birds do. The Maiasaura emphasizes Montana's importance in the geologic history of the world. State fish, black-spotted cutthroat trout. Montanans adopted the black-spotted cutthroat trout to help save the fish from decline due to overfishing and changes in the environment. The name comes from the black spots that run down its back and a pinkish-red splotch on its jaw. The cutthroat trout is a favorite food for grizzly bears. State bird, western meadowlark. The western meadowlark is known for its loud, cheerful song. It is about as big as a robin, with a bright yellow chest and throat under a black collar. You can find western meadowlarks in spring and summer along most dirt roads, sitting on fence posts singing to other meadowlarks nearby. It symbolizes optimism and wide open spaces. State butterfly, the mourning cloak. Bright blue shimmering spots along the inner edge of a yellow or beige border characterize the mourning cloak's dark brown wings. If viewed closely, the wings reflect purple highlights. The underside of the wing is dark brown with lighter brown edges. The mourning cloak symbolizes the beauty that is often overlooked in Montana. State grass, blue bunch wheatgrass. Blue bunch is found all over the state and throughout the West. It grows mostly in flat areas and lower mountain slopes and is good grazing grass for cattle and sheep. It represents the fertile, nutritive grasslands of the Great Plains, often misunderstood and mistreated, but important to the nation. State nicknames, the Treasure State and Big Sky Country. The Treasure State came naturally as a Montana motto because of the state's valuable minerals, gems, and precious metals. In the 1960s, Montanans also adopted the nickname Big Sky Country after a novel called The Big Sky by Montana author A.B. Guthrie, Jr. They chose this nickname to reflect their love of the land.